The pounding started just after 1 in the morning. I know because the old grandfather clock in the hallway had just finished its single chime when the first blow landed against my front door. Not a knock, a blow. The kind of sound that tells you whoever is on the other side has stopped pretending to be civilized. I sat up in bed slowly, the way a man my age has to sit up. 68 years of hockey injuries and concrete work in the Calgary winters don't leave a body in a hurry to move. My hip cracked, my lower back protested. I reached for the lamp on the nightstand and clicked it on, and that's when the second blow came, and this one was different. Heavier, like metal against wood. I knew that sound. I'd swung enough hammers in my life to recognize one when it hit something. "Dad, open this goddamn door." My son's voice. 38 years old and still sounding like he did at 17 when he didn't get his way. Except now, there was something underneath it I hadn't heard before. Something cold, something that had made up its mind. I swung my legs off the bed and put my feet on the cold hardwood. The Christmas tree was still up in the living room, even though it was the middle of January. I'd been meaning to take it down. Margaret would have had it down by Boxing Day. Margaret had been gone 14 months now, and the tree was just one of 100 things I hadn't been able to bring myself to deal with. "Dad, I swear to God, I will break this door down." Another blow. Then a woman's voice. My daughter-in-law. "Just do it, Brennan. Just get it open." That was when I felt it. A hand, light on my shoulder. From behind me. I should have screamed. A man my age, alone in his house, feeling a hand land on him in the dark. I should have had a heart attack right there in the bedroom doorway. But I didn't, because I knew that hand. I'd known it for 65 years. "Don't open it yet," my brother whispered. "Let me handle this." I turned my head, and there he was, standing in his old gray housecoat, the one our mother had given him the Christmas before she passed. His white hair was a mess from sleep. His glasses were crooked, and in his other hand, he was holding his phone, and a little red dot in the corner of the screen told me he was already recording. I'd forgotten he was even staying with me. He'd driven down from Saskatoon for the weekend because I'd had a small fall on the back steps clearing ice, and he told me he wasn't comfortable with me being in the house alone. I'd argued. He'd ignored me. That's how it had always been with us. "Garrett," I whispered back, "what is this?" "This," he said quietly, "is what we've been waiting for. Just open the door, Hugh. Open it slow, and don't say anything. Let them say it." The pounding came again. The wood around the deadbolt was starting to splinter. I could see it from where I stood. My son had brought a sledgehammer to my house. My son. The boy I'd taught to skate on the pond behind my parents' farm. The boy I'd put through engineering school at the University of Alberta. The boy I'd given a down payment to when he and his wife bought their first house in Airdrie. I walked to the front door. My slippers made a soft scuffing sound on the floor. My brother was 3 steps behind me. The phone held low at his hip. The camera angled up. I undid the chain. I turned the deadbolt. And I opened the door. My son was standing on the porch in the cold, no coat on, just a black hoodie pulled up over his head. The sledgehammer was in his right hand, the head of it resting on the wooden boards of the porch. His wife, my real, was behind him, and she was holding her phone up too. But her camera was pointed at me, pointed at my face, like she was already filming the evidence she was going to need. "Took you long enough," my son said. I didn't say anything. "Garrett had told me not to. You're going to let us in," he said, "and you're going to sign some papers, and then we're going to be done with all of this." His wife stepped forward. "We tried to do this the easy way, Hugh." She'd never called me Hugh. For 12 years she'd called me Dad. Or sometimes nothing at all. The fact that she'd switched to my first name told me everything I needed to know about what was about to happen next. "Sign what papers?" I asked. My brother's hand twitched at his side. He was reminding me, "Don't lead. Let them say it." My son pushed past me into the house. He didn't take off his boots. He tracked snow and salt onto the rug Margaret had bought at the antique market in Inglewood the summer before her diagnosis. His wife followed him. She closed the door behind her. Neither of them noticed Garrett standing in the hallway shadows. "Sit down, Dad," my son said. He gestured at the kitchen table like it was his own house. "We need to talk about the cabin." The cabin? Of course it was about the cabin. 1,200 square feet on the shore of Pigeon Lake, 2 hours north of where we were sitting. My father had built it with his own hands in 1962, hauling cedar logs out of the bush in the back of an old Ford truck. I had spent every summer of my childhood there. My own kids had spent every summer of theirs. There were pencil marks on the doorframe of the back bedroom, marking the height of my son and my daughter every July from when they were 3 years old. The cabin was worth something now. Lakefront property in central Alberta wasn't what it used to be. The last appraisal Margaret and I had done, just before she got sick, came in at $820,000. "What about the cabin?" I said. "You're going to sign it over to us." My son sat down across from me. He laid the sledgehammer across the kitchen table like it was a serving platter. "Tonight. We've got the paperwork. Muriel had a notary friend write it up. You sign, we leave, and nobody has to know about any of this." "Know about what?" He smiled. It wasn't a smile I recognized. "Dad, come on. We both know you've been slipping. The fall last week. The way you forgot Muriel's birthday in November. You leaving the truck running in the driveway for 3 hours that time. You're not safe to be making decisions anymore. The doctors are going to agree with us. We've got a friend at the foothills who's already willing to write a letter. You're going to lose the house. You're going to lose the cabin. You're going to lose everything to long-term care fees inside of 2 years. We're trying to protect what's left of the family for the family." I looked at him. My son. The boy whose first word had been Daddy. I looked at his face and I tried to find that boy somewhere in there, and I couldn't. There was just a man with cold eyes telling me my own brain wasn't working right so we could take my father's cabin. "And if I don't sign," his wife answered, "then we file for guardianship on Monday. We've already met with a lawyer in Edmonton. He's confident. We've got the medical, we've got the witness statements from the neighbors about the truck, we've got everything, and once we're your guardians, we make all the decisions anyway. The house, the cabin, your savings, the pension from the union. All of it gets administered through us. It just takes longer, and it costs more in legal fees, fees that come out of your estate. Which means there's less for everyone in the end, including us. So we'd rather do this the easy way." "The easy way," I said. "The easy way," I said. "The easy way," my son repeated. I felt very old in that moment, older than I'd ever felt. My wife had been dead for 14 months, and my son was sitting at her kitchen table at 1 a.m. with a sledgehammer telling me I was too senile to know what I was doing, while his wife held a phone up to record me agreeing to it. I wanted to cry. I won't pretend I didn't. There's a particular kind of grief a man feels when he realizes the child he raised has become a stranger wearing his child's face. But I didn't cry. Because that's when Garrett stepped out of the hallway. My brother walked into the kitchen with the phone held up in front of him, and the little red dot was still on, and he had a small smile on his face that I'd seen exactly twice in my life. Once when our father had finally apologized for something he'd done to our mother in 1984, and once when Garrett's first wife's lawyer had tried to get him to sign away his half of the farm in the divorce, and Garrett had laid a single document on the table and watched the lawyer's face turn the color of old milk. "Hello, Brennan," my brother said. "Hello, Muriel. I have to say, I've been looking forward to this conversation for about 4 months now." My son's face changed. So did his wife's. The woman, who had been holding her phone up like a weapon, suddenly remembered that her hands had fingerprints on them. "Uncle Garrett," my son said, "what are you?" "I'm staying here, with your father. Have been since Saturday. He had a fall, but I'm sure you'd know that, since you're so concerned about his well-being." Garrett walked around the table and stood beside me. He didn't lower the phone. I want you both to know that this device has been recording since the moment your father got out of bed. Audio and video. It's also been live streaming to a cloud account that my own lawyer has access to. So even if you grab it from me right now and smash it with that hammer of yours, the file is already saved. In 2 places. 3, if you count the backup. My daughter-in-law lowered her phone slowly. Your medical evidence, Garrett continued. The letter from your friend at the foothills? I assume that's Dr. Kessler? Yes, I thought so. I had a chat with the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Alberta on Tuesday. Just an informal conversation. They were very interested to learn that Dr. Kessler has been writing capacity assessments for patients he's never personally examined. There's apparently a process for that kind of complaint. It moves quickly when there's documentation. My son's face had gone the color of paper. Your lawyer in Edmonton, Garrett went on, his voice calm as Sunday morning. Mr. Pelletier on Jasper Avenue, he sent your father a letter on the 17th of November, notifying him that he was preparing a guardianship application. That's standard procedure. Your father took that letter to me. I took it to my own lawyer in Saskatoon, who happens to specialize in elder law and has for 31 years. He took it to a colleague at a firm here in Calgary. They've been gathering evidence ever since. What evidence? My son whispered. The bank statements you've been forging, for one, the ones you submitted to Pelletier showing erratic spending on your father's part. We have the originals from the Royal Bank. They don't match the copies you provided. Bank fraud is a federal offense, by the way, not provincial. Federal. RCMP, not local police. My reel made a small sound, like a tea kettle, right before it whistles. The witness statements from the neighbors, Garrett continued. Mr. Donaldson next door. Very nice man. He came over for tea last Sunday. He told me all about how you'd come to his door asking him to confirm in writing that your father had been wandering at night and leaving appliances on. He told me he'd refused because none of those things had ever actually happened. He also told me that he'd written down the date and time of your visit and that he'd be happy to provide a sworn statement to that effect, which he did. On Tuesday. My son stood up from the table. The sledgehammer was still on it. His hand twitched toward it, and I saw Garrett's eyes flick to his phone. And I knew that was being recorded too. Every micro-movement of it. And I knew my son knew it. And the cabin, Garrett said. The reason you're here tonight at 1 a.m. with a hammer. The cabin is in a trust, has been since 2019. Your mother and father set it up after your mother got her diagnosis because she was concerned about exactly this. It cannot be sold. It cannot be transferred. It cannot be borrowed against. It passes to your sister upon your father's death, free and clear, with the stipulation that you and your children are entitled to use it for 2 weeks every summer, for as long as you live, which frankly, after tonight, your father might want to revisit. My daughter slid down in my mind like a slide projector clicking forward. Lainey. 41 years old. Living in Halifax. Married to a fisheries biologist. Mother of 2 girls I didn't see often enough. Lainey, who had called me every single Sunday morning at 10 o'clock for the last 14 months without missing one, just to ask how I was. Lainey, who had flown out for a weekend in October because she was worried about me. I hadn't told her about her brother coming around asking strange questions. I hadn't wanted to start trouble. I had still believed, even then, that maybe my son was just stressed. Maybe my reel was just being practical. Maybe I was making it into more than it was. I should have told my daughter. I should have told her in the spring when it started. Dad. My son's voice had cracked. He was a child again, suddenly the way they go when they realize they've actually done it. They've actually crossed the line, and there's no walking it back. Dad, please. We didn't mean, it's not, you have to understand, I want you out of my house, I said. My voice was steadier than I expected. Dad, please just listen. I want you out of my house, I said again. And take your hammer with you. You'll regret this, Muriel said suddenly. Her face had gone hard. The fear had passed into something uglier. You'll regret it when you're alone in this house and there's nobody to take care of you, and you're freezing to death in a snowbank because nobody comes when you call. Get out, Garrett said, and his voice had finally lost its calm. Get out of my brother's house, now. They left. My son took the sledgehammer. He didn't look at me on the way out. His wife did. She gave me a look I will carry with me until I die, a look of absolute hatred, the look of a person who has been caught and who will spend the rest of her life blaming the people who caught her instead of the person who did the catching. The door closed. The cold air settled. The Christmas tree blinked its little white lights at me from the corner. Garrett walked over and turned the deadbolt. Then he came back to the kitchen table, and he sat down where my son had been sitting, and he put his hand over mine, and he didn't say anything for a long time. Eventually I said, "How long have you known?" "Since June." June. Margaret called me in May, the week before she went into hospice. She'd been worried for a while. She told me that Brennan had been asking questions about the cabin, about the will, about your finances. She said the questions had a feeling to them. She made me promise that if anything happened to her, I'd keep an eye on you. She didn't tell me. She didn't want you to spend her last days thinking about it. She wanted you to spend them with her. I cried then. I'm not too proud to admit it. I sat at my kitchen table at almost 2 a.m, and I cried for my wife, who had known what was coming, and who had spent the last weeks of her life arranging for her brother-in-law to protect the husband she was leaving behind. I cried for my son, the boy who had become whatever he had become. I cried for myself, because something I hadn't even known I still had been taken from me that night, and I knew I'd never get it back. Garrett let me cry. He didn't try to stop me. He didn't say anything stupid. He just kept his hand over mine until I was done. The next 2 months were the hardest of my life, and I include in that the months when Margaret was dying. The RCMP investigation moved faster than anyone had told me to expect. The forged bank statements were the easiest part. The medical fraud took longer because the college had to do its own internal review before charges could be laid against Dr. Kessler. But they laid them eventually, and from what I understand, he lost his license and is now selling real estate somewhere in British Columbia. The lawyer in Edmonton, Mr. Pelletier, claimed he'd been deceived about the medical evidence in the bank records, and I think that's probably true. And so no charges were laid against him. He sent me a letter of apology that I never answered. My son was charged with fraud over $5,000 and uttering forged documents. His wife was charged with the same, plus an additional count related to her false statements to the lawyer. They both pleaded guilty. My son got 18 months. Muriel got 2 years less a day. My son's children, my grandchildren, ages 10 and 7, went to live with Muriel's mother in Red Deer for the duration. I've seen them twice since this all happened. They look at me like they've been told things about me. I don't try to correct it. They're children. They'll figure it out for themselves someday, or they won't. My daughter flew out from Halifax the day after it happened. She showed up at my door at 6 p.m. with a suitcase and her 2 girls and her husband, and she told me she was staying until I told her to leave. She stayed 3 weeks. We took down the Christmas tree together. She helped me sort through Margaret's clothes, which I still hadn't been able to face. Her older girl, Royson, who is 9, slept in my bed beside me one night, because I'd had a bad dream and she'd heard me through the wall, and she came in and held my hand until I fell back asleep. I don't know what I did to deserve that child, but I'm grateful for her every day. My brother stayed for another month after my daughter left. He'd retired the year before, and his wife had passed in 2021, so there was nothing pulling him back to Saskatoon. He cooked. He shoveled the driveway. He drove me to my appointments. He sat with me in the evenings while we watched the Flames lose, which they did with admirable consistency that winter. In March, when the snow started to go, he packed up his truck and headed home. I asked him to stay. I would have asked him to live with me. He said no. He said a man my age needs to figure out who he is on his own, and that I'd been figuring it out wrong. Leaning on Margaret for 43 years, and then leaning on grief for 14 months, and now it was time to stand up for myself. He was right. He was always right. He was always right. That was the most annoying thing about him. I changed my will that spring. Lainey, gets the house and the cabin both, with the same stipulation about her brother's children being able to use it, but only after their father has served his time and demonstrated, in writing, an understanding of what he did and why it was wrong. I'm not holding my breath, but I'm not closing the door either. Not entirely. They're my grandchildren. Margaret would have wanted some kind of door left open for them. I sold the truck. I didn't need it. I bought a small Subaru that I can actually get in and out of without my hip seizing up. I joined a curling club. I'd played in my 20s and stopped, and I'd forgotten how much I'd loved it. There's a man there named Doug, a retired school teacher, who has become something like a friend, which is not a word I use lightly at my age. We have coffee on Wednesday mornings. We don't talk about what happened. He knows. Everybody at the club knows. They don't ask. My granddaughter Rosin calls me on FaceTime every Sunday now. Her sister sometimes joins. They show me their drawings. They tell me about school. Rosine asked me last month why her cousins don't visit anymore, and I told her that her cousins were going through some hard things with their parents, and that when they were ready, we'd see them again. She said that was fair. She's 9. She's a better person than I'll ever be. I think about that night sometimes. The pounding on the door. The sledgehammer on the kitchen table. The look in my son's eyes when he told me I was slipping. I think about how easily it could have gone the other way. If Garrett hadn't come down for the weekend. If Margaret hadn't called him in May. If she hadn't seen what was coming when I was too close to it to see it myself. A man builds a life. He builds it slowly, brick by brick, year by year. And he assumes, because he can't help assuming, that the people he built it with are building alongside him. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes one of them is just waiting. Waiting for the right moment to take what he wants. The thing nobody tells you about getting older is that your dignity is not something the world keeps for you. Your dignity is something you have to carry yourself, all the way to the end, and there will be people, sometimes people you love most, who will try to take it from you. Sometimes with kind words and concerned faces. Sometimes with a sledgehammer at 1 a.m. You keep it anyway. You keep it because it's yours. Because you earned it. Because no one else gets a vote. That's what I learned that winter. That's what my brother taught me, and what my wife knew before either of us did, and what my granddaughter will hopefully never have to learn the way I did. Hold on to your dignity, even when the door's breaking, even when the people you raised are the ones holding the hammer. It's yours, and it stays yours, right to the end. I've thought about that night more times than I can count. The pounding. The sledgehammer on my own kitchen table. The face of a boy I raised, looking at me like I was an obstacle to be moved out of the way. And I've come to believe that what happened to Brennan didn't happen overnight. It was a slow drift. Year by year, choice by choice, he traded something small for something smaller. And by the time he stood on my porch in the cold with a hammer in his hand, he had nothing left in him that I would have recognized as my son. That's the cause and the effect of it. He didn't wake up one morning a different man. He became one quiet decision at a time. I think a person's character is built the same way a cabin is built. One log at a time. You either lay them straight and true, or you let them lean, and a leaning wall holds for a while, but it doesn't hold forever. Brennan let his lean. Myria let hers lean. And when the pressure came, the whole structure of who they thought they were just gave way at the seams. That's not bad luck. That's physics. What saved me wasn't strength. I'm 68 years old with a bad hip and a worse back. What saved me was that my wife, when she was dying, used what little energy she had left to make a single phone call to my brother. That phone call was an act of love so quiet, I didn't even know it had happened. And it taught me something I should have known sooner. Wisdom isn't about being clever. Wisdom is about seeing what's coming when the people you love are too close to see it themselves, and doing the small, unshowy thing that protects them anyway. Margaret had that. Garrett had that. I'm trying to learn it. The other thing I've learned is that nerve matters. Not anger. Not noise. just the plain refusal to be moved. When my brother told me to open the door slowly and let them say it themselves, he was teaching me something about courage that I'd somehow gone my whole life without learning properly. Courage isn't shouting back. Courage is standing still. While the worst version of someone you love says the worst thing they're capable of saying, and not flinching, and not signing, and not giving them what they came for. That kind of nerve is built in small moments, long before the door starts breaking. You either have it stored up or you don't. So if there's anything I'd want to leave for the person reading this, it's only this. Build your character straight. Look out for the people who love you quietly. And keep your nerve, because there will be a night, sometime, when someone tries to take your dignity from you. And the only person who can refuse to hand it over is you.